Hello, my name is Douglas Gilbert. I'm a photographer for many years, and I'm living in Western Michigan these days. So in April or in March, I graduated. It was the end of uh, winter term, and moved to New York on the 1st of April. I was a New Yorker with a job. I had been introduced to him just uh, right at the end of the school year in '64. Well, I had never heard anything like that. The editor had never heard of him. He said, well, sounds like an interesting story and you've got some interesting ideas. Why don't we do it? I wanted to be a fly on the wall because that meant getting close off camera. And I told him my interest was in his life. It was on not only the music and the friends he had, but what his life was like. I remember not long after we were working, I saw an article from some obscure little newspaper out of the South that had a picture of him on the cover playing before a whole bunch of workers in the fields. They were all standing and sitting around, and he was on a little stage and singing to them. And I said, remember that picture? Are you going to be doing any more of those kinds of appearances? And he said, no. And I said, well, could we maybe stage one where we would set it all up like a concert and have you do that? I could make some photographs. I want to make it look real, I told him. And he stopped and he looked me right in the eye, about 12 inches away, and said, nothing's real, man. He was a hard person to get close to, yet that was what I needed, was to get close to him. So he invited me to the house he was living in, which was right on the edge of Woodstock in a little town called Bearsville. And Allen Ginsberg was there. He'd just come home from India. And Ellen was really fascinated with Ginsberg. And Ginsberg drew out a harmonium. He was offering it to Ellen, saying, I don't know how to play this. Can you help me? So they had a music lesson right there in the kitchen. One afternoon, Ellen came over to me and said, do you have a car? And I said, yeah. And he said, could you take me somewhere? And so I took him and John Sebastian in my car, and we headed off for a town about 30 miles away. So Dylan was in the front seat, and John's in the back with a guitar. And we were starting out driving down the road, and Sebastian began strumming the guitar and began to sing a song. And Dylan kind of looked up with a grin on his face and turned around to Sebastian. And what Sebastian was playing was Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man. It wasn't out yet. It wasn't, because it's an electric, which came later. And Dylan was laughing and nodding his head, and Sebastian was playing away. He got to the store. It was a record store. We were in. He was looking through records, and this sales girl who was standing off, probably 15 feet from us, stood watching us, just watching, staring. And she finally came over and said, are you, and he looked up and said, no, I'm not. And turned around and walked out of the store just immediately. The rest of us came straggling back after him.